Hi, this is Reverend Stelmark, and I told you I was coming downtown. I was coming downtown because we're bringing our show to the streets. We're going to be on break, and this is a tape show. But I want you to know that we're coming to the streets, and we're going to be shooting live on the streets, and we're going to be talking to people on the streets. Hi, thank you for tuning back in to Issues and Answers. I'm Reverend Stelmark, your host, and today we're here with attorney Ted Johnson, who's located at 44 Broad Street, Suite 711, is it, Ted?
Yes, sir.
711, can't forget that. But anyway, I chose to come to Attorney Johnson's office because he's a very unique attorney. He handles the majority of murder cases. And as you know, Atlanta is running rampant in the past few years of a lot of murders. And many of these persons who are being charged with murder are indigent, young folks. They can't afford attorneys. And I would assume that many of the cases that he received are low-paying, court-appointed cases from the county. So let's get on with this interview, and let's meet Attorney Theodore Johnson. How you doing, Attorney Johnson?
Good afternoon, Reverend.
Johnson, I want to know, what is the scenario of the court cases that you're handling in Fulton County?
Well, sadly, Rev, the whole dynamic of indigent defense has changed in Atlanta, if not Georgia. Before, we had a system where the state of Georgia would pay for competent representation for people who could not afford to hire their own attorneys. Right now, Governor Perdue has instituted some defense standard council which employs attorneys who are not really up to par in terms of handling capital murder cases or other capital cases, and they're giving these cases to younger attorneys who don't have the experience to handle it, and as a result we have a lot of people, in my opinion, who are not receiving the representation that they deserve based on what they've been charged with.
So that's pretty much, in some instances, putting innocent people behind bars for the rest of their life if they are not guilty.
Certainly, certainly. You know, without a thorough, incompetent investigation of one's case, one technically cannot receive a fair trial. So by extension, Rev, if you have an attorney who is just not sophisticated in the ways of learning how and knowing how to build a case, then certainly a client's case can be compromised and the innocent person can be incarcerated.
Let's talk about you. How long have you been practicing law?
I've been practicing law since 1989.
What school did you graduate?
I graduated from the Thurgood Marshall School of Law in Houston, Texas.
Okay. And what brought you here to Atlanta?
What brought me to Atlanta was opportunity. You know, I don't care where you are. I moved here from Chicago, Illinois, but I don't care where you are. When you hear of Atlanta, you hear about positivity, you hear about spirituality, you hear about wealth, you hear about opportunity, and you hear about people helping people. So Atlanta, for me, being the type of person that I am, was an easy choice.
Have you ever been a prosecutor?
Yes, I was a prosecutor in Chicago.
In Chicago?
I was a Cook County State's attorney. And I think that's what makes me unique, is that I had the responsibility of learning how to put people in prison. And so now, being a defense attorney, I could use what I learned as a prosecutor to assist my clients in their defense.
That's very interesting that you would say Cook County. Wasn't it Cook County that went to the Supreme Court about being able to register voters in jail under the McDonald versus Cook County Board of Registration?
Certainly, it was.
And they won that, and that's what made it possible for me to go into the Fulton County Jail to register voters now. How long did you practice, or were you a prosecutor in Chicago?
from 1989 to 1993.
So you were there for quite a while.
I was there to long enough to learn what I was doing and to find my way around the courtroom.
Okay. And so when you came here to Atlanta, did you immediately go into private practice?
No.
Or did you?
No, I started out in the Fulton County Public Defender's Office, and I did that for a reason, Rev. I turned down the U.S. Attorney's Office in Macon. I turned down the Lewis Slayton to be an assistant district attorney here in Fulton County because I knew that at heart I was a defense attorney. That was my calling, to be a criminal defense attorney. So what better way than to go to the Fulton County Public Defender's Office to learn how things are done here in Atlanta, Georgia, before segueing into private practice.
Okay, so now I'm gonna get to you now.
Okay.
There's a lot of you public defenders, and I say you public defenders because at that time when you were practicing as a public defender, what was this thing about, if you plead guilty, I'll get you out of jail?
Well,
how many of those did you do?
I don't recall ever doing that because I had an agenda, Rev.
Okay.
My agenda was to be the best criminal defense attorney I could be. And and this may be a simple thing, it may be a funny thing, but sometimes you could look at a person and tell that they're a public defender.
Okay.
You could never tell that I was a public defender.
Why? Was it because of the way you dressed?
Because the way I dressed, the way I carried myself, excuse me, Rev, hell or high water,
Okay.
you had a fight on my hand. I was not going to be the meet you and greet you type of public defender. If there was a bad police arrest, a bad police stop, I'll fault that, right? But attorneys are bound, right? We work for the client, and people forget this. We work for the client. So if you have a client, even though you tell this client, hey, the police had no business stopping you, had no business even talking to you, I can beat this case, but it's going to take 3 months, right? But if you want to, if you plead guilty to probation, you can get out of jail today. That's the client's choice, Rev, and I can't force a client not to get out of jail.
Okay, but now what I'm troubled by is that a lot of our brothers and sisters. Now, as you know, many persons, when you're sitting in jail, man, you just get tired. You really get tired. We never knew that this day now, that pleading guilty to that case will cause you not to be able to get employed, possibly cause you not to get housing, and cause a whole bunch of problems. My question to you, is there anything that can be done now for those who were under duress and did plead guilty to get out of jail, and now they realize they made a mistake? Is there anything that we can do now to go back on that?
We in Georgia have to change the way that we've been doing things to the extent that our legislatures have to submit legislation to change this thing. You have a guy who's 18 years old who was picked up a felony for attempting to enter an auto. And for the rest of his life, this 18-year-old who's now 40, right, can't vote. How ridiculous is that we would force such a person who did such a thing as a teenager, right, to have to get a pardon from the governor in order to get his civil rights restored? We have to change our way of thinking and change our way of doing things. But there's an incentive for those in Georgia, and I would hate to say this, Rev, but the conservative right, who don't want certain people in our community to have the right to vote.
Well,
and as a result of that, we have these laws that are steadfast and still on the books.
Well, I don't know if you are aware, House Bill 511 came up this legislative past session. House Bill 511, non-judicial committee, they met to change the law on your criminal record. It would say aggravated assault, not guilty if the person was found not guilty by the jury, but it would remain on your criminal record.
Yeah.
House Bill 511 was charged, and they were trying to remove that. Okay, if you were acquitted, it still remains on your record, the charge, and that you were acquitted. Still on your record. If you were pardoned right now, and you get a pardon, whatever charge you were arrested for and convicted and served time, it would say pardon. House Bill 511 was designed that they were going to remove that. We never did get to that point. The president of the Georgia District Attorney Association and the president of the Solicitors General Association came into that meeting and said, we have come to announce that we want the state of Georgia to discontinue expungement of criminal records, and no longer will a person be able to expunge their criminal arrest record if they've been convicted. Our staffs, we have been cut short, our budget's been cut, and we can't afford to place staff on expungement of criminal records. Do you know that would have been devastating? If that happens in the state of Georgia, that would be devastating. So we know that the next legislative session, that there's going to be some folks in there pulling to stop expungement of criminal arrest records. And that's why I'm encouraging you to clear your criminal arrest record. Get busy. Did you know that that was in the legislature, that they're trying to do that?
I did not know, but I'm not surprised. And what's even remarkably sad to me, Red, is that under the guise of fiscal responsibility, these people are rather forego the entire lives of so many citizens because it's not fiscally feasible to check and expunge these records. What a sad state of affairs. And you know, being here in the South, it's not Christian-like at all. No. So that's kind of, you know, that's kind of a sad state of affairs. Yeah.
How can we get attorneys on board to help us fight this? Because you and I know the persons that's going to be hurt by this are going to be the majority African Americans.
African Americans, Hispanic Americans, people who are quote unquote non-traditional Americans, if that is a definition that we could agree on, okay. Whatever that is, Rick.
Okay.
But what jumps out to me, how can we change this?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk to Paul Howard about this. Let's call Carmen, Smith about this. Let's call Gwen Keys about this. These African American, Hispanic American public servants who happen to be prosecutors, allow them to help us. Allow them the opportunity to help us, right? And if they choose a position one way or another on this issue, then we should know how to vote next time around.
I'm scared to talk to them about it. And I say that with reservations because there were people from some of those persons who you named from their offices, and they were in support of expungement being done away with. Won't name them, but I can. Mm-hmm. And they know who they are. Right. I'm very, very concerned that can we move fast enough to get the forces rallied. You know how many hundreds of thousands of people who will be affected by this? This is going to knock us off the box. Why would people want to see us as tax burdens instead of taxpayers? I mean, I don't understand it. But I got to get in on this book of yours. Where's that book? I see a copy of that book. Where's that book? Now, this book that you wrote, I saw a copy on your desk earlier.
Yeah,
right there. Yeah, okay, right there. That's the book. That's the title of the book. Faces I Have Seen. Give me a quick overview synopsis of this book.
The overview of the book is about my life and about some of the people that I've represented.